Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America, we bring the resource to you. The DU Podcast with your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
Buckle up, everybody. We're back here on the Ducks Unlimited podcast. Things are happening. Snow is falling. Winter winds are blowing. And we are welcoming in, again, our guest from up in Canada, Dr. Scott Stevens.
Hey, Mike. Good to be here.
Well, it's always great to have you here, Scott. And that's kind of become a bit of a monthly ritual here to have you on the show when we play the little walk-up music for you. I hope this isn't going to your head in any way.
No, it's not. But my wife might beg to differ. She would probably have a different story.
Yeah, I think she has asked if she could join a podcast episode with you sometime in the future, maybe to set the record straight on some things. And so we're still working that. We're efforting.
Right. Yeah, that one would be interesting for sure.
Well, we are here in early November 12th. Friday afternoon, actually. We're going to try to turn this one around really quick and get it out for people here on the weekend because things are happening. We have some weather systems that are sweeping across the mid-continent, one of which I believe is going to be an Alberta clipper that's coming in this weekend. I don't know if it's already up there right now, but I know also that some snow has fallen across parts of the Canadian prairies. We're going to get you to provide an update on that. And so all of those things are combining, basically paint a landscape where the ducks are going to be leaving Canada. Ducks and geese are going to be leaving Canada, and that place is going to be locked up probably for the year. The hunting season, the fall and winter, I guess, season there for Canada, at least in the prairies, mid-continent, kind of coming to a close. And this is always an exciting time for folks down here in the States because it means that those birds are going to be coming south, however many of them that there may be up there and whatever their composition may be. So let's start, Scott, by setting the stage. I want you to kind of tell us what has happened here over the past few days. I know you actually were deer hunting this morning and you got stuck because of some snow drifts and that kind of stuff. So I want you to get to that as well. But what's the weather up there right now? How much snow is falling and what are all the implications of this? And so, yeah, just paint the picture for us.
Yeah, well, I would say in general, we had a very unseasonably warm fall overall. In fact, it was probably a couple weeks ago that I had my last duck hunt, and it wasn't very good. Actually, didn't fire a shot in 2 days. There were ducks around, but they just were hard to pattern. Like we found, my friend had scouted and found birds in a field. They were also using a little creek system as kind of a day roost. We hunted the creek system and saw a couple birds. They were still in the area. That night we scouted, found, several, probably 500 birds in a cornfield, had permission there, set up, saw a few geese, maybe 1 or 2 ducks. Yeah, so they were not very well behaved for us, but it was still warm, like no freeze up or anything like that. But my guess was that when those birds were behaving like that, they were close to pulling out. They were sort of aggressively feeding. They were trying to pack on some energy, and most of those birds were going to be out of there. So my perception was most of the birds had departed prior to this system hitting. I did hear a few Canada geese probably migrating this morning, but yeah, starting on Wednesday evening, we started getting sort of rain and freezing rain, and it turned to real slushy snow. Yesterday, we had snow and winds all day long. We had this low pressure system that came from the west, and I know there was snow or rain in Minnesota to the south of us too. And it kind of parked here and spun. And yeah, I just got done not too long ago snow blowing my driveway. And I probably, in the drifts, I had 2 foot of snow, went to the top of the snow blower. And yes, I tried to get to the deer blind this morning to sit, and I made it there. I got slowed down, bogged down twice on the way in, made it there, parked, hunted, didn't see anything, got ready to leave. Nope, I was stuck in the farmer's driveway. He came with the tractor and cleared it out and got me boosted and on my way, and I was stuck again on the road, half a mile down the road. So, yeah. So
the joys of snow.
Conditions changed quick around here. Went from unseasonably warm to slammed in with winter and snow. So I guess the good news is lots of moisture in this snow. In fact, that first bit that we've got that is sort of at the bottom of the snow pile is super slushy. In fact, when I was snow blowing, my snow blower would sort of get clogged up when I was dealing with that part of it. It was kind of like the consistency of a snow cone, and didn't want to spit it out. The stuff that's on top is lighter, and that blew no problem. But yeah, so to help us with next year, that's some pretty good moisture. Will provide a good frost seal because we got the rain as things were freezing up. I think the only challenge is this system didn't dump as much snow to the west in the real pothole region. I live north of Winnipeg. Outside of the pothole region, that's where we got most of the snow. It didn't quite go far enough west to really have impacts on, wetland conditions for next year.
Yeah, Scott, a lot of stuff has been happening as I led off this episode with both in they're in Prairie, Canada right now, but then also south of you there in the Dakotas. And I want to come back to that. Before I do, I have a question. I got to go back to you getting stuck in the snow. Now, when you arrived out there, because I knew you were going to go hunting this morning, we had lined up this recording for earlier this morning. I guess it would have been 11 o'clock, and I knew you were going to go hunting. The plan was for you to be out, assuming you hadn't, shot a deer and were tracking it or something. The plan was for you to be back out in time for our recording at 11. But then I happened to check Facebook as I was waiting on you to join, and I saw a picture, right. Saw a little short video of you indicating or talking about and showing the farmer actually clearing the road in front of you. And one of the things that came to my mind was, two things. Okay, Scott's probably not going to make it for 11 o'clock because that was like 10 minutes before 10.
Right. Yeah.
Or 11. The other was it snowing when you were out there this morning? Was it did all that snow fall after you got there?
No, most the snow had kind of quit by the time I made it to the deer blind. When I left this morning, I think it was still snowing, but snowed all day yesterday. And we had strong winds, probably 25 mile an hour winds. So, it was snowing all day. That was blowing around. And before I made it to the landowner's place that I hunt, I actually got sort of stuck, temporarily stuck, I would say. Nobody had to pull me out, but I was able to work my way out, but got slowed down in a drift on the way in.
And that didn't deter you. That emboldened you, right? It's funny how that works, right? I got stuck once, and then I was able to get my way out. So surely I'm not going to find any kind of conditions that are worse going forward, right? So let me keep on going.
Well, right, yeah, no. This is a good line of thinking too, because I've had these challenges before. By that point, though, I was only about a quarter of a mile away from my destination to hunt. So, I thought, might as well go in there and deal with this in the daylight rather than trying to get back home. I've done that before. Story once duck hunting, ended up with 3 flat tires, and kind of like today, it's like, well, we were at the boat ramp, might as well hunt for a while and come back and deal with tires or being stuck later. So that's what I did today too.
Okay. Fair enough. You have my endorsement. I would probably have done the same thing. Okay. Well, let's see. Let's move back a bit in what I was saying, talking about how things are developing all across the prairies. Dr. Johan Walker joined us last week, and we talked about some pretty notable rain systems that moved through North and South Dakota, dropped a fair bit of rain there, and improved wetland conditions markedly by all accounts within a good swath of the Dakotas. Now we have a good snowfall occurring in Manitoba. You did reference that prior to the snow falling there in Manitoba, we had some rain, so that's going to help with the getting some good soil moisture. And then when the bottom drops out of the temperature, which it looks like it's going to do here soon if it hasn't already, that's going to help with that frost seal, and that's going to carry us forward presumably into next spring. So that's all good. So we have some parts of the prairies that are starting to look favorable from a drought recovery perspective. Still a long way to go, as Johan pointed out. But what about farther west? I don't think the picture is as optimistic or as rosy out in Saskatchewan and Alberta, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I would even say, if this system had moved through, a couple hours west of me, it would have been better here in Manitoba. But I think we got more snow east of the real prairie pothole region here in Manitoba. But yes, in Saskatchewan, I'm not aware that they've had any big systems like this. I know after I made that post on Facebook, some of our staff in Saskatchewan that I'm friends with on Facebook had commented, "Whoa, you guys have way more snow than we do," and that kind of thing. So yeah, my sense is that in Saskatchewan and in Alberta, things haven't improved. Like maybe we got a little dose of here in Manitoba, and like Johan talked about last week in the Dakotas too. So yeah.
I want to ask you also about dig into a bit more on what you saw in terms of birds across the prairies there this year. We've talked about this a little bit before, but since our last discussion, and I guess, well, you kind of mentioned that earlier. So from a big picture perspective, let's come at it like this. How would you characterize this fall? Maybe based on what we were expecting. We talked about the drought. We knew that it was going to kind of constrain production out of the prairies this year. How did your observations kind of match what you expected or not match with what you expected based on drought and anything else that we would have imagined might have been unfolding this fall?
Yeah, I would say generally it matched expectations. Earlier in the late summer, I think we talked about, we were going to have a fall flight of mostly adult birds. They were going to be kind of wise and wary and tough to deal with. And, definitely saw that as I was trying to find places to hunt, late in the year here before birds started trickling out. We found limited little pockets where there were ducks, where there was a little water still around, but those were few and far between. So you had to put on, a lot of miles to find maybe a duck hunt for two guys. And then, a couple times we were pretty successful with that and birds decoyed and, we had a good hunt. I did get questions from friends sort of asking, "Hey, what's the deal? Like, I can't get ducks to decoy for nothing this year." So I think that was
they're smarter
consistent.
than us. They've been around for a while.
Yeah. That was consistent with, what our prediction was that, that'll be the story from a lot of folks as they move south too. It's like, people will still have good days where things will work, conditions will be right and, they'll be successful, but there'll be a lot of days where birds are wary and not decoying. And, that's largely a function of mostly adult birds in the fall flight.
I was on Lake St. Clair a couple of weeks ago. I took a week off and went up there to visit with some friends, colleagues, and we hunted for a few days. And we did not have success at all with some of the dabblers, some of the mallards in that area. They looked like they knew the routine. Number of mallards in the area at that time was pretty low to begin with, but those that were there, they looked like they were adults. They were all fully plumed, big birds hanging out in the areas where we could not hunt. And, it was as reminded me of hunting in the South in, let's say, January, when the ducks have already seen all the tricks. And my sense, I don't have a lot of history hunting St. Clair Flats, but my sense is that was probably a bit of an unusual thing to see birds that wary that early. And we had some pretty decent weather. We had some wind. We had some cooler temperatures, nothing too cold. It was weather that you would have thought would have moved birds around a little bit, but we struggled. And I know a lot of folks on the WMA up there did as well. So that too. Now, granted, that's an area that's not going to be, that's not going to get a lot of their birds from the prairies. So, don't exactly know how to explain every aspect of that, but nevertheless, that's kind of the conclusion that we were drawing, is these might be some adult birds, despite Michigan having maybe some good production this year. So it's just kind of some interesting observation for us as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I think the challenge is when you start out with a fall flight that doesn't have many juvenile birds in it, that ratio, is likely only to get tougher as birds move south because the young birds are more susceptible to be harvested and probably are going to get whittled out of the population first. So, by the time you reach Arkansas and Mississippi and Louisiana, you probably don't have many young birds that are left, especially, when you don't start out with many in the beginning.
Right. Well, let's see. The other thing that I heard earlier this week from some colleagues was sort of observations about the, let's say, reduced number of non-residents that were hunting in Canada this year. It was obviously more than what were there last year. There was very, very few non-residents that even attempted to make it into Canada last year to do any kind of hunting. And I forget what the restrictions were, but there was some way that some non-residents could get there. Maybe they were already stationed there or something. I don't exactly know what that story would have been, but nevertheless, very few there last year. And then I think I heard that maybe some of the guide services and outfitters this year were running at about 50% capacity. So still a reduction in the number of non-residents based on kind of what we were hearing. Did you notice sort of a reduced number of non-residents compared to what you might typically expect?
Yeah, that's consistent with what I saw and what I heard from folks too. We had guests that were planning to come to Canada and visit and hunt this past fall, and I know some of the COVID protocols to get across the border were just enough that folks were like, the odds of me testing positive as I'm ready to crawl on a plane to return to the U.S. were slim. But if they did, they had to spend, an extra 2 weeks here in a hotel or something. And there were, folks who were still running businesses or, had to get back to work who just said, yeah, I can't risk that. So I know we definitely had people who canceled out of their trip because of those sort of conditions. So, I'm not surprised that, maybe guides and outfitters were at about 50% capacity based on that.
Well, Scott, this may be one of the last times that we talk with you here on this particular season of the DU podcast. It's November and ducks are leaving Canada, so there's not a whole lot else for us to talk about here as we get into December and January, unless you start getting into some more decoy construction ideas or things of that nature. Now, but I did want to kind of ask you what's next for you and getting outdoors. You still have some deer hunting ahead of you, and I know that you're going to get out there and do a little bit of trapping as well. Is that kind of what's going to occupy your time going forward?
Yeah, that's what's on the slate. With deer hunting, I do have one deer in the freezer that I got on like the second day of the muzzleloader season, shot a buck, and so now I'm left with an antlerless tag. And boy, do I see bucks whenever I go out. In fact, last night I had one come out on the trail with 10 minutes of legal light left. That must have been, he was inside 15 yards. And it's like, oh gosh, why can't you be a doe? But so I'll try to connect with an antlerless deer, and then I will be moving and shifting gears and getting things ready to go out on my marten trap line up in the edge of the southern boreal forest. So that's always a fun winter activity and good place to spend some time.
And then I guess in terms of what we need to continue to hope for between now and next spring, we need some precipitation, whether it be in the form of, I guess at this time of year, it's most likely going forward, it's most likely going to be in the form of snowfall, I would guess, a little bit farther west. And I guess we just need to continue to hope for those type of weather systems to move in. Hey, before I forget about this, that Alberta Clipper, I think, is going to be moving in here. What's it going to drop the temperatures to there in Winnipeg or across the prairies?
Yeah, let me see. I know, while this low system was setting here, we were right around freezing. We were like 32, 31 degrees. It looks like as we go into, tomorrow or Sunday, highs of 24 Fahrenheit, lows of 13. So that will make any water that we didn't have hard will become hard pretty quick with those kind of conditions. Yeah, and, we're not above freezing in the extended forecast. So we'll be frozen up here. I don't know if that's true further west. I mean, places in Alberta, they kind of get some of that warm air coming off the mountains and can warm up. So there could still be some birds holding out in places like that. But across most of the Canadian prairies, there will not be much for waterfowl left moving forward here.
Okay, well, they're on their way south, and I don't have any reports from the mid-continent right now. We'll try to check in with some folks. I mean, other than what we talked with Johan about, and it was kind of the same as what others have said. You know, it's kind of tough to find birds, and when you do find them, a lot of them are going to be some of the adult birds. So, we'll continue to go forward here. The southern states are going to be opening their seasons here pretty soon. I think Arkansas opens next weekend, and then Mississippi later in the month. And we just kind of continue to go forward from that. I have seen, actually, now that I'm thinking about this, some reports out of the Illinois River Valley, Mississippi River Valley. It appears to be some delayed migration of divers into some parts of the Midwest, which is interesting. And so it's always difficult to keep track of these types of things just based on anecdotal reports, but we'll do the best we can. And so, any final thoughts for us from up in Canada this year, Scott?
Yeah, I guess maybe the parting thought I'd offer is, I think probably to position folks further south to be thinking about their duck season is to just have different expectations this year, given, the poor production we've had. Be happy when conditions are right and you shoot a limit during the season. It's probably not going to be stellar all the time. And if you get one of those days where conditions are right and birds are working, just sort of relish that, because it's probably not going to be the norm this year.
Yeah, I think that's wise advice, and so that I would echo that. We appreciate you joining us for multiple times throughout this particular podcast season. If something comes up that we want to talk with you about, I'll give you a holler and we'll get you back on the horn. And but otherwise, it might be sometime in next spring or so, or summer, before we check in with you. So we'll have to say goodbye to the Bonanza walk-up music for a while.
That's right. Well, I'll try and stay warm, and I'll be ready to report come spring when we're ready to touch base again.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott, and happy holidays to you and all your family up there, and hope you all enjoy the remaining, the lovely winter months of Prairie, Canada.
Yeah, thanks. I will work to do that.
All right. Special thanks to our guest on today's episode, Dr. Scott Stevens with Ducks Unlimited Canada. We always appreciate his time and his insights from up there north of the border. As always, we thank our producer, Chris Isaac, for the work he does getting these podcasts out to you. And then to you, the listener, we thank you for joining us here today. We thank you for your support of wetlands and waterfowl conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And visit www.ducks.org/DU Podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.